Hey everybody, welcome back for week 8 of Amy Miller Recruiting in Yoga Pants. This week we're talking about compensation, and so this is a really tricky one. I have oh god, I've hit record like 50 times. Just trying to kind of gather my thoughts around this and just kind of make sense of this topic because it's a big meaty topic and there's a lot to unpack here. So I want to maybe just kind of start by grounding us a little bit in how companies do compensation and how we come up with these crazy numbers in the first place. And I think this may be one that we talk about for a few weeks. I could see this being a bit of a mini series, and maybe today we kind of talk about the big ideas around comp. Next week we can kind of get into some specifics about what do you do when a recruiter calls you, those kinds of things. So let's see how it goes for the next few weeks, because like I said, this is a topic. I've done webinars on this before, and I don't think I've ever done one in less than an hour. Like there's just a lot in regards to compensation and offer negotiation that I think is really important. So with that, let's try to just, again, kind of set some ground rules here. Let's kind of determine where we're starting. I want to get us on the same page here. And so how do companies decide what to pay in the first place? We all know that there's ranges and there's, comp teams and people that are responsible for this kind of stuff. How does that even happen? So here's how that happens typically. Most companies will focus on something called cost of labor. So you probably have heard the term cost of living. That's usually where candidates are coming from. They're like, oh, but my mortgage. Oh, I have 6 kids. Oh, I'm moving to Seattle from Des Moines, Iowa. My housing cost is, quadrupling. It doesn't matter. It's not a factor. It's not something we think about. It's not something we plug into the salary calculator when we're making your offer. We are starting from a place of cost of labor. And so the comp team, typically most companies will have a comp team, or maybe it's part of HR or whatever, that is really focused on, and typically on an annual basis, going in and making those adjustments. So there's tons of data out there, and companies will pay for salary surveys, and there's just a lot of information that can be uncovered that tell us things like, okay, a software engineer in Portland, Oregon costs this. That same talent, that same kind of person, that same level of experience and expertise is going to cost something else in Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas, whichever. They're right next to each other. So that's where the starting points come from. That's where we come up with the ranges. Then we look at something called internal equity. So we want to think about, well, what are the people that we currently have making? What are our top performers getting? What does our attrition look like? Have we lost people because of comp? Are we seeing an uptick in offers being declined? And is it because of compensation? And so all of this data and all of this information is all hopefully going into a place, a big old pile of data that then gets played with and sliced and diced, so that our compensation teams know, what does it cost? What is the cost of labor? What is the market telling us that this person is going to have to be paid? So it really starts from there. I know at a company I worked at years ago, that this is not my current or even most recent company, but a previous company, every year we got a new sheet. They would literally hand us a piece of paper, and it was available on the internal web as well. But it was like, okay, here's your ranges. Here we are for 2017. So we had this very kind of specific guideline, and that was updated every year. So that's where that comes from. Rarely are you going to be in a situation where a hiring manager just pulls a number out of their ass. or a recruiter. I mean, that's just not how it works. We really do, meaning companies really do put a lot of thought and effort into cost of labor ranges. So that's one thing. The other thing to think about is total comp. So there are salaries, there's a base salary, and there's total comp. Those two things are often very different. So especially for those in tech, and I know a lot of people that subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for following me. A lot of you are in tech or getting into tech if you're a new grad or intern. And so you can bet that there's going to probably be a huge equity play. Now, whether those are actual RSUs and actual stock that you can hold on to or you can sell, or maybe they're options if you're going the startup route or a pre-IPO company, but that total comp is a big deal. So that's also something that you want to be thinking about. And then finally, the other leg of that compensation stool is typically something like benefits. So there's a lot of different variables and upside in benefits. I can tell you the single best benefits I ever had as an employee was from Microsoft. They have great benefits, and not that other companies I worked for don't. They all do pretty good. But Microsoft was really like world class. I mean, I didn't pay anything for anything. My husband had a massive back surgery and it cost me like, I don't know, $20 or something. So, that is a big part of your compensation as well. And so when you're thinking about starting this conversation with a recruiter, or you get that call and you think, okay, yeah, the role sounds good, but keep in mind that there's a whole lot more to the story than just the base salary or just a single number. And so that is really the danger. And I say this because so many, I don't know, experts, thought leaders, dare I say, will give people this really faulty information that, if a recruiter's not giving you a number in the first call, they're trying to hide a low, salary, or they're trying to, lowball you or whatever, or they don't know what they're talking about. That's typically not true. So I'm going to ask you, as a job seeker, as a potential candidate, give the recruiter a little grace. It's important to know what a package could potentially look like. You want to make sure that you're not starting this process or kicking off interviews or whatever for a role that just is simply not going to work for you. So it's okay to ask those questions, and it's definitely wonderful to have compensation discussions early, often and specifically. We'll talk about that in a future video. But just remember that there's probably a lot more variables than just the initial number. So here's my suggestion, and I would say this to both recruiters as well as candidates. So if you're a job seeker, think about this. If you're a recruiter, I'm going to encourage you to do this as well. Think about your bare minimum. I know as a potential candidate, if I were to consider making a change, I have a threshold. I know it does not make sense for me to consider something that is below X. That's my total comp, that's including my equity, that's including my benefits package, that's including my everything, all the elements. I know that in a single year, I need to be at a certain level. And I will tell recruiters that. I will say, look, if you can come close to this, cool, we should talk. If you can't, and a lot of times they can't, I'm expensive. I'm just kidding. That's okay, but I know my threshold, and I would encourage you as a job seeker, figure out your threshold. And if you're not sure what that should be, let's talk about it. Send me an email, amy@recruitinginYogaPants.com, put compensation in the subject line, and I will try to give you some specific one-to-one advice. For my recruiters, be prepared if a candidate is asking, and if a candidate is making that important, be prepared to say, look, we're looking at a minimum of X. I can promise you, unless something goes horribly awry, I'm not going to come at you with an offer that is below this threshold. Now, that may be a very low conservative number. that may be half of what you need. But again, I just want to throw something out there to let you know that I'm serious about this conversation, that I have a bottom of the range, that I'm sure you're going to do well in the interview and you're going to prove to us that you're worth more than that. But just so you have some comfort and knowledge that, look, there's a bare minimum that I won't go below. Even something as simple as that can provide enough security maybe to a candidate to feel like, okay, yeah, these people are serious and this is a conversation worth having. So just know that all numbers are negotiable. We're not gonna like write that number down and say, oh, but you said you'd take this. I get it. I know that there are variables and things happen, and as you learn more about the role, you may decide your price goes up, and that's okay. So, but it's okay to really just draw that line in the sand. I cannot seriously consider anything below this. As a recruiter, I would never come at you with anything below this. And as long as those two numbers are not too far apart, or we know that we have some reasonable room to negotiate, let's take the next step. Let's have the conversation. A lot of times it may be a phone interview with the hiring manager. It may be kind of working towards coming on site. And the final thing I will leave you with as a job seeker or as a potential candidate, you cannot turn down an offer you do not have. I get a lot of people who say, oh no, I don't even want to have a conversation. I don't even, what are you actually saying no to? What you're saying no to is a phone call. What you're saying no to is probably a conversation with a hiring manager. What you're saying no to is maybe an interview. And I get it. And I understand that for some of you, that may be where you are. It just does not make sense right now for me to pursue something. I've only been in my job for a month. I'm certainly not taking those calls. I like what I'm doing now. I need to go figure it out and get better at it. So I understand that there's going to be circumstances where it's just not the right time or just doesn't make sense. But I also want you to remember that a phone call from a recruiter doesn't equal an offer. We're not there yet. We're still at the very early stages of just getting to know each other, building some trust so that when it comes time to make an offer, you can feel good that the recruiter has your best interests in mind. We will talk about that in a future week. I'm really excited to dig into this with you guys. There's so much to unpack here, but hopefully this gives us a foundation that we can build on in future videos, just like the relationship you're building with your recruiter, so that when it comes time to get an offer, you know that they've done right by you. All right, we'll see you guys next week.